Hello, and welcome to another edition of Coffee Talk with immigration attorney Brian D. Lerner. As many of you know, Trump has essentially started an atmosphere of fear among those people in the United States who are not U.S. citizens. There has been roundups, which seems to have increased considerably in the last week to 2 weeks, while ICE says that it is normal and that they've been actually doing it for some time. There's a couple things that don't make sense. Trump tweeted that essentially he's getting rid of the drug dealers and the violent criminals. Well, what doesn't make sense about that is that the way that immigration law has worked for years is if somebody is serving a sentence for the drugs and or the violent crimes, they are not just allowed to be released from prison, where, the officials and everybody says goodbye, have a nice day. Immigration has a system where a hold is placed on them, meaning that they essentially request that once their sentence comes to an end, that the prison does not release them into the public, but rather releases them into control and custody of ICE, which then puts them in detention, upon which they then can fight their case in front of immigration court in a detained manner. Now, while some people would qualify for bond, the violent criminals, for the most part, are under what's called mandatory detention. It's Immigration Nationality Act, Section 236, and there's been lots of cases on it. And so, in mandatory detention, the immigration judge does not even have the authority to grant bond for them to try and fight their case while being free. And then what happens is if they win, then of course, they cannot be deported because they won their case. But if they don't win, they have an order of deportation and they're removed. So to say that all these violent criminals are being rounded up because they're free roaming the streets, that doesn't sound either legitimate or real because of the fact that they would have already been in immigration detention. So that's one thing. Next, as far as the drug dealers go, there's lots of different drug crimes. There's possession for sale, possession for transportation, possession for manufacturing. There's federal and state. There's the different amount of grams or ounces. There's the import and export issues, and some of those are considered aggravated felonies. Some are not. Some can be reduced and vacated. Others can be expunged. There's a whole plethora of things that could be done depending. But again, they wouldn't just be rounded up and sent off. If they don't already have a deportation order, which that's not what Trump was saying. He's not saying that all these people with prior deportation orders are being rounded up. He said or tweeted that the drug dealers and violent criminals are being rounded up. Again, they would have been sent, depending, to detention as well to fight their case. And even if they weren't, the drug ones, there are some waivers available and there's ways of fighting cases, and that they can't just be removed, outside the U.S. without having an opportunity to fight their case. That's their right. If they're in the U.S. and they're picked up, they have a right to fight their case in front of an immigration judge. So some of that just doesn't make a lot of sense with what's been happening. So some of what Trump tweeted might not be entirely true. So given given that, I've had a lot of people come into my office who are lawful permanent residents, even ones that had crimes 30 years ago, and they recently, when at least when the executive order restriction on residence was removed, they've still come back in the country where they even they haven't had any problems for years and years, and now they're being put in secondary detention, and they're afraid that they're going to either be requested to give up their residency and or put in removal proceedings. So all of these people are wondering what to do. Well, they many times, even if you have a crime, depending on the crime, if it's more than 5 years old, you finish probation, you haven't done anything since, and you have a lawful permanent resident, you are allowed to statutorily file for naturalization. And in fact, again, depending on the crime, the officer cannot deny the naturalization solely based on a crime that occurred more than 5 years ago, that's not an aggravated felon, and that is basically allows you to go forward in such a manner that if it's approved, you will be allowed to get a U.S. passport. You won't have to deal with the impending fear issues that are being promulgated across the country. So if you have had the green card for some time, even if you have a crime, I would suggest giving me a call. I do give an initial free consultation. I'll let you know if it could be done, what the risks are, what's necessary, and then we go forward from there. Because the laws granting naturalization, of course, are different than the laws either renewing the green card or granting the green card. So um, it's up to you. But as the present situation in the country continues, I might suggest if you do have a chance of becoming a U.S. citizen, you ought to take it and move forward. But make sure, of course, you have proper legal counsel and you don't just blindly, apply for naturalization with a crime in your background. Okay, more in the coming videos.